Hello everybody and welcome along to today's video where we have reached my top 10 Peter Capaldi Doctor Who stories, his stories as the 12th Doctor of the last three series. Today I'm going to be counting down from number 10 to number 1, the best stories he has ever done. Of course, if you haven't caught up already, do go back and check the last three videos. They'll be in the description, the links to them from episodes 40 to 31, 30 to 21 and 20 to 11. But now let's get straight into it with number 10. So just edging into this list at number 10, it is Dark Water, which I think is a fantastic opening story to this two-part finale for Series 8. It perfectly introduces Missy and we really try to start to understand who she really is, why she's been this mysterious character through this whole stories, or the series so far. And then the reveal at the end, of course, is absolutely phenomenal. And it's just a really interesting concept as well that we explore, the sort of life after death, this concept of a heaven, as it were, in the show, which hasn't really been done too much in Doctor Who. There's been very little about an afterlife in Doctor Who before, I think. So that was kind of, obviously it was a good opportunity to link it with the death of Danny Pink. It was probably set up from the beginning anyway, but that was nicely able to link it in and then explore that concept of an afterlife. One scene that I absolutely adore from this episode is the throwaway the key scene between Clara and the 12th Doctor when they're out in that sort of fake volcano, and you can see how far Clara's willing to go, and it's such a sort of tense scene, and when you're watching that you're like, what on earth is going on? How is she just thrown away all the TARDIS keys? That's it. They're trapped outside the TARDIS, and obviously revealing that actually it's all a dream. But it's so well acted and brilliantly well done, I think, that scene. And then of course the Doctor saying straight after that, do you think I care for you so little that betraying me would make a difference? And that really set out the 12th Doctor almost, to say that he really does care about Clara, that Clara can do terrible things to him and he still cares, that he's not necessarily this horrible man that he's sort of, or doesn't really care about her or anybody that's sometimes been portrayed to be in this series. He actually cares for Clara so much. And I think that's absolutely a wonderful scene and a wonderful episode. Of course, bringing back the Cybermen as well, and sort of building it up and revealing them, I think is such a great reveal. As unfortunately, we knew it was coming because it had been revealed months before in promotional material that they were in this episode, but it's still a nice reveal, I think. And of course them walking out St Paul's Cathedral out of the invasion in 1968 and attempting to take over London or the Earth is a great way to end this episode. So coming in next at number 9, it is Twice Upon a Time. So slipping in pretty late, the final episode of the Peter Capaldi era is an episode that I really enjoy. Of course it's quite sad towards the end, but it is still a very enjoyable story. It's nice to have the multi-Doctors having the first sort of facing off against the 12th Doctor. It's a really great relationship. Of course Moffat slightly screwed it up with the sexism of the first Doctor, but ignoring that part of it, everything else is wonderful. This episode isn't so much about the plot of it, it's more about the sort of relationship between the two characters and the two Doctors accepting that they are going to have to change and going to have to regenerate. Of course, plot-wise, it is still quite nice, the sort of battlefield scene towards the end when we have the human miracle of the Christmas Day truce in 1914. That's a sort of wonderful way to cap off this episode, and it's one of the most sort of beautiful and wonderful and hopeful scenes of Doctor Who, that as much as they often talk about how bad humanity is and all this kind of thing, actually there are miracles and the humanity can be absolutely wonderful in those sort of short periods and short moments. So I think it's a lovely scene to end on and sort of help the two Doctors to accept that it's time for us to go as well now. And then of course those final few scenes with the regeneration, sort of meeting the various companions again is just absolutely lovely in the Doctor's final few lines. Yeah, I've said it, go check it out, my Twice Upon a Time review, I did it fairly recently, so and you're all probably aware of how amazing Peter Capaldi is in this episode anyway. But yeah, the regeneration scene really pushes it out for me as well, because it is just wonderful. Now, pretty what a lot of you think is one of my most surprising choices to go inside the top 10. At number 8, it is Extremis. The opening part of the Monk trilogy from Series 10 is a story that I absolutely love. It's a classic Stephen Moffat. It really does feel like he's sort of rolling back the years, bringing out all his favourite tropes almost, as it were, and creating a wonderful story in it. The whole idea behind this computer simulation, simulating an invasion before the aliens come, I absolutely love. It's such a brilliant idea that I don't think it's really been done very much in Doctor Who before, to have these all-powerful aliens that can simulate the whole world, including the Doctor and the TARDIS and everything, and do this alien and sort of work out how the humans will respond to any sort of attack or anything. Is just such a clever idea, and it's so cleverly sort of revealed towards the end as well, as suddenly Nardole disintegrates into computer code, as it were, and then Bill doing the same, and gradually the Doctor explaining away exactly what's going on, that they're all just simulants in a computer game. It's when you really don't know that early on, it's not obvious. Like some episodes the twist is a little bit obvious. Of course it becomes it. Once Nardole disappears it's pretty clear, but sort of early on it is just this really sort of interesting, you can't quite understand exactly what's going on. What is this mysterious veritas they're talking about? But then it's so brilliantly revealed towards the end. And all the stuff with Missy as well and the Doctor is absolutely fantastic. It's sort of nicely running alongside, of course, revealing what's in the vault and setting up the almost Missy's return towards the end of the series. I think it's and it foreshadowing, of course, towards the end of the series when you've got the lines without hope, without witness, without reward, linking back to the 12th Doctor and the Doctor Falls as well. It's just all those elements combined to create a fantastic story, I think. And the cliffhanger itself is wonderful as well, with the Doctor sort of stuck on Earth knowing that an alien invasion is imminent from these all-powerful monks, and he's got no backup, no way of stopping them as it stands. And it's just this sort of, what do I do? I'm blind. I can't see anything. These all-powerful aliens are about to take over. What do I do? I think it's a brilliant way to end the episode and set up this trilogy, even if it doesn't come out that well in the end. Now, next up at number 7, it is The Doctor Falls, the Series 10 finale, the final episode. It almost feels like the final episode for the 12th Doctor. It really does. He sort of has his final stand. He sets out who he is with his wonderful speech to the two masters. He essentially dies on the battlefield, and that is pretty much the end of him. He's just fighting off this regeneration towards the end. And it is just a really wonderful story. Of course, we've had the setup in World Enough of Time, and then you've got these multiple Cybermen appearing, two masters, Cyber Bill, that whole concept being explored is fantastic. Those scenes in the barn where she gradually realises that she's a Cyberman, and then trying to cope with that is wonderfully realised, I think, in this story. Unsurprisingly, Michelle Gomez and John Sim coming back as the two masters play off each other brilliantly, and they have some fantastic scenes. The 12th Doctor and Peter Capaldi really is on form in this story. As I say, it almost feels like his last story, with all these wonderful speeches he sort of gets to say, and he really gets to be the Doctor almost one last time, sacrificing himself to save a few people. Not many, but a few, and that's who his Doctor is. He does it just, if he can save anybody, he will. He'll sacrifice himself for that. I think it's really bringing his arc full circle when he wasn't too sure who he was and what he stood for early on in his era, but by the end he really understands that he is the Doctor. He's there to save people. Whoever he can, he will save. And I think that's a wonderful sort of message to leave with this 12th Doctor. And of course the cliffhanger's wonderful as well, that ending. Those last few scenes, once Bill and Heather disappear, this sort of throwback to previous generations with all the companions appearing, the various referencing lines, and then the first Doctor appearing at the end is just a fantastic cliffhanger to end this wonderful story. Now, coming up at number 6, it's Mummy on the Orient Express from the middle, sort of late in Series 8. It's a wonderful story by Jamie Mathieson, a kind of very much separate and standalone story, but a really interesting idea of this mummy that suddenly appears to people, but only the person who's about to die can see it, and where you're kind of trying to figure out why it's targeting people, what it is, and it's a sort of wonderful, almost detective story, trying to work out exactly what's going on. The Doctor's almost being this detective through it, but it also sort of showing, certainly earlier on, how much of a darker and a very different Doctor he was, that he was willing and just said, you've got to let people die. If we're going to find stuff out, people are going to have to die, and that's just how it is. Whereas, as I've said sort of with some of the other episodes, the previous Doctors maybe wouldn't have felt that and wouldn't have gone that way, and would have done everything they could to stop these people dying, where he just accepted, as I absolutely adore that line he says on the beach towards the end of this episode, where he says, the only choices you have are bad ones, but you still have to choose. And I think that's a sort of really sets out his Doctor, and certainly in this episode and a lot of Series 8, is that a lot of the time he's put in a situation where people are going to die either way, and he's just got to accept that and find the quickest way of losing as few people as possible, but accept people are going to get killed. And I think that's a great way of sort of setting out his Doctor in this episode. And it's just a really nice, sort of enjoyable story. Of course, a few people die, I know, but it's still a really interesting, mysterious story trying to understand exactly what's going on. Perkins in this story, played by Frank Skinner, he's a wonderful sort of companion character almost for this story. And it nicely repairs the 12 and Clara relationship as well, I think, as supposedly their last hurrah. But it isn't in reality, and they get to carry on together at the end of this episode in a wonderful conclusion. So we're getting into the nitty-gritty of it now. We're into the top 5. Coming in at number 5, it is Flatline, which is another episode that is just absolutely brilliant. Another great episode by Jamie Mathieson. Look, he's got number 5 and 6 on the list. He's a phenomenal writer, I think. He did such a great job with this story. It was he's always said it was his very first idea for a Doctor Who story, was the idea of these sort of 2D creatures trying to invade a 3D world, as it were, and having to sort of crawl through walls and everything because they haven't created the third dimension. And it's sort of quite unusual to have a sort of villain or an alien that we don't understand anything about throughout this episode, that's from a completely different universe where they have different dimensions, and you have to communicate with them in such a different and weird way to actually be able to, well, you can't really communicate with them in the end ultimately. But I think that's a really sort of nice concept to explore something so completely different in Doctor Who. And it's sort of nice, I know it gets some criticism, but it's a nice opportunity for Clara to almost become the Doctor in this episode. It's clearly they needed a slightly more Doctor-light episode, but I think Clara does a brilliant job of leading this story and really almost being the Doctor throughout this, having to sort of figure it out on her own. But there's also some great scenes with Peter Capaldi as well, of course, when he jumps out of the TARDIS at the end of the story to all the aliens, all the boneless with his sonic screwdriver. Of course, it's a bit classic sort of magic screwdriver and magic wand with it, but it really sort of, you feel this man is the Doctor, he's the man who stops the monsters. It's a great sort of Doctor-y moment when he really reveals himself to say he is the Doctor, so I really like that part of it, and it's just a fantastically enjoyable episode. Coming in next at number 4, it is Face the Raven, which again is a very, very good story, but this episode is all about the conclusion, of course. And I know for some people it's pretty dropped because of Hal Bent in sort of more recent times, but I personally still absolutely adore that ending. It's probably some of Peter and Jenna's best acting in Doctor Who. There's that scene, the dialogue is perfect. It's such a sad and emotional scene, but they put it off so spectacularly in those sort of last 10-15 minutes. It's a good story building up to that. It's kind of an interesting idea of this trap street and a shield running it, all these aliens sort of hidden inside it, that are hidden as humans as well. But it's all sort of what's quite going on here. It doesn't seem to be as it seems, and then of course we reveal that it's all a Shielders plan, but not quite a Shielders plan, because Clara's gone too far, and it's obviously completing the arc of Series 9, essentially, that Clara wants to become the Doctor so much, and she says why can't I be like you? I want to become like you almost. She wants to be the Doctor, but she just can't because she's a human, and that's just, she'll never quite break that barrier. So it's sort of a very well set up to that final conclusion when we find out that Clara's got to die and that's got to be it, and of course she faces the Raven. And then the final sort of moment there with that full-on angry Doctor. We get it a little bit earlier on, but certainly at the end when you can just see the sort of inner rage of Peter Capaldi at Ashildr there, the 12th Doctor, that he's so angry about it. And is sort of teleported away to who knows where at the time. So for me it's just a fantastic story. So we really are getting down to the final few stories now. At number 3, it is World Enough and Time. And this setup of this 2-part story is just absolutely phenomenal. I love this story, it's brilliant. I have to admit that first time around watching it I wasn't too sure, but I rewatched it just before Christmas and it really won me over completely. It really is one of the best episodes of the Capaldi era. The whole concept behind it of these the almost genesis of the Cyberman story all over again is so brilliantly realised, and not something that's been done in the normal part of the show in quite that way. Of course you have the parallel universe Cybermen, but it's a little bit different. With this you've very much got the bare bones Cybermen, those sort of the top knots as they're called, which is such an interesting and creepy idea of these sort of humans that have died and are gradually sort of halfway between between human and Cyberman as they're experimenting and trying to figure out how best to continue the human beings as they're all dying out. I think it's so interestingly well realised and explored through this story. And of course the whole subplot with Razor and Bill, of course, Razor who becomes the Johnson Master towards the end is fantastic. He's such a great little character through this story. It's so annoying that he was revealed to be the Master before it, because if you hadn't known that that was John Sim, or the Master wasn't, that you didn't know the Master was telling this episode, you wouldn't have immediately noticed that that was John Sim. But when you know it, I spotted it straight away. It was just obvious that was John Sim, unfortunately. So it's such a shame they spoiled that, but it doesn't really let this episode down too much. It's still, yeah, the relationship between them is so nicely built up for then him to just turn on her right at the end of this episode as she is turned into a Cyberman, as sort of almost unexpectedly, I think. Certainly, at least at the beginning of this episode, it wasn't quite what you were expecting. And Missy, I think, works really well in this story as well. Of course, we're exploring the whole concept of her turning a bit more good. And it's the really nice scenes early on where you can see she is starting to care a little bit. And she really is trying to be good in this story. As much as it all goes a bit wrong, she's still trying. So I really like that element to it. And of course, bringing the John Sim Master back kind of almost turns her evil again in the Doctor Falls as well. But it's still a really well thought out, interesting idea that's really well done, I think, in the story. And it is such a brilliant cliffhanger with Cyber Bill there stood with the 2 Masters alongside her as it's Bill being turned into a Cyberman. We've got 2 evil Masters turned up. The Cybermen are being created for the first time. It's really all going rather wrong for the 12th Doctor. And then we end on that shot of a tear appearing from Bill's eye, which of course would turn out to be quite important in the Doctor Falls, but it's just, I think, a fantastic way to end the story. Now, coming at number 2, I think this might be quite a surprising choice for a lot of you. It's The Witch is Familiar, the second part of the Series 9 opening 2-parter, which, right from the first time I saw it, I've absolutely adored this story every single time I've watched it. it's just brilliant. The interaction between Clara and Missy, between 12 and Davros, those sort of scenes they have between those those separate characters is amazing throughout the story. It's so well written, the dialogue is brilliant, the scenes are acted amazingly in this story. The opening sequence is fantastic, seeing that sort of insight into what the Doctor's like, and the music's fantastic in the background as well. Then we get those amazing shots of Skaro, the Doctor in Davros's chair, then all those scenes between the Doctor and Davros as we have alongside the scenes between Clara and Missy. The sort of Davros seemingly tricking the Doctor, and then the Doctor's actually tricked them all, and is going to succeed in the end of it all. Is just amazing, a brilliant idea. And of course the whole idea of those sort of dead Daleks coming back up through the sewers and coming back up to destroy all the current Daleks that are being sucked up through there. Such a clever idea in there as well. Missy's brilliant throughout this story. This is where she really sort of, I really warmed to her for the first time, because I wasn't a massive fan of her in Dark Water and Death in Heaven. I didn't sort of dislike the character, but I didn't really buy into the hype necessarily quite so much after that story. But certainly once The Witch of Familiar Head, I was completely won over by Missy. She's just fabulous in this story. It's amazing. And then the sort of ending of this story, where we have the Doctor and Clara Oswald in the TARDIS, so the TARDIS reappears, they get to fly away, and then that final scene with the Doctor and Davros on that battlefield, as the Doctor does go ultimately back to save Davros and take him away, and sort of says it doesn't matter if friends, enemy, as long as there's mercy. It's such a sort of nice thought to leave with. And for me, just caps off a wonderful two-part story, but the second part in particular is just phenomenal. And so there's only one more story left that I haven't talked about yet. I'm sure a lot of you probably would have guessed it by now, if not right at the very beginning of this list of 40 episodes. It is, of course, Heaven Sent. I've said it before, I'll say it again, this is simply the best Doctor Who story ever, for me personally. Everything about it works amazingly. Peter is incredible, the plot is incredible, the story, the writing. How can Peter pull off 55 minutes in a castle on his own? I don't know, but he does it amazingly. Thanking him in huge parts of the amazing script. The brilliant ideas you kind of build up trying to work out this mysterious mechanical castle, what quite's going on here, where has he actually been teleported to, why are the stars not making any sense, who are all these skulls, and of course the reveal towards the end when we hit the Asbantian wall, and the reveal of exactly what's going on, what the Doctor's going to have to do and keep on doing for billions and billions of years, and then the reveal scene at the end and sort of the breaking the wall scene is just absolutely incredible. It's such an amazing story, and then you break through that, and when we turn up, we're in Gallifrey. It just keeps on getting even better in this story. I can't sort of understate how amazing this story is for me. And of course, it's not just the writing and the acting, the direction. Rachel Talalay is just an amazing director. To be able to sort of pull this off in a weird rotating mechanical castle with just basically one character and and the Veil. How she manages to make this so visually interesting is absolutely incredible. There's so many great shots throughout this story. At some point I might have to break it down and look at the various different shots because it's full of them. And then the other thing is the music, of course, which the soundtrack needed to be amazing in this episode to really help carry it along, because at times there is a good maybe 3 minutes where there isn't a single line of dialogue because simply the 12th Doctor doesn't need to say anything, he's just doing stuff. So you need to have great music that really leads the story through there and really leads the scene. And that's what I think Murray absolutely nailed in the story, is really leading those scenes when it needs to be. And of course, breaking the wall is amazing at the end of it as well. But throughout this story, the music is such a sort of very different to what we normally get in Doctor Who. This more sort of piano-y style music, but not in a sort of emotional way, almost sort of Beethoven style. It feels, which is very unusual, I think, for Doctor Who, and he sort of works it so well throughout this story. Therefore, I cannot wait for the Series 9 soundtrack to finally get a full disc of Heaven Sent. But yes, Heaven Sent is just, for me, absolutely incredible and the best Doctor Who story. Easily the best Peter Capaldi story that we've had. And of course will always be now, because there won't be any more, unfortunately. And so that is it. I have reached number 1. We've gone from 40 to 1 over the last 4 weeks, ranking every single episode of the Peter Capaldi era. But I want to hear from you guys. What is your favourite Peter Capaldi story? What is your top 10? What is your top 40? I would love to hear what you have to say. Do you agree with me on Heaven Sent? Or is it not quite up there for you personally? I really, really want to hear what you guys have to say about this. And I hope you've enjoyed this, these 4 videos of ranking the Peter Capaldi episodes. I know quite a few people, when I did my video on New Year's Eve, asked to see some more rankings videos. So I hope you've enjoyed these ones, and I'm sure I am planning to do a few more over the next few weeks or months. Because I know that it is something that you're all quite interested in, so I'll try and sort of come up with lots of good opinions on lots of different episodes or whatever else, and do a nice little ranking videos every now and then at least. So I hope you have enjoyed these and enjoy the future ones to come. But other than that, guys, that is it for these top 40 and top 10 in this video episodes of the Peter Capaldi era. Remember to like this video, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another video. Goodbye!